When people talk about Mercedes-Benz, the conversation usually goes straight to the legends. The S-Class, the AMG monsters, the ultra-modern luxury SUVs, the cars that dominate headlines and social media. But behind all of that attention, there exists another side of the Mercedes world. A collection of models that quietly built reputations not through hype, but through years of dependable ownership, mechanical honesty, and real-world durability. These are the cars that don't show up in flashy Instagram posts. They don't dominate auction headlines, and they don't always get the respect they deserve at car meets. But talk to long-term owners, independent mechanics, and people who actually live with these cars every day, and a very different story begins to emerge. These are the Mercedes models that people buy, keep for decades, and refuse to sell. Cars that survive harsh winters, long commutes, high mileage, and years of daily use without losing their character. Cars that prove that true engineering isn't always loud, sometimes it's quiet, consistent, and incredibly durable. Today, we're diving into 5 of the most underrated Mercedes models ever built, vehicles that deserve far more recognition than they get. Not because they were the most expensive or the fastest, but because they were built to last. 1. Mercedes-Benz W201. The W201, better known as the 190E, is often remembered as the small Mercedes. And that label alone is one of the main reasons it remains so underrated. When this car was introduced, Mercedes wasn't trying to build an economy vehicle. They were trying to build a compact car that still felt like a full Mercedes. That meant over-engineering almost every part of the chassis, suspension, and drivetrain. The result was a car that felt solid far beyond what its size suggested. Owners frequently point out how balanced the 190E feels on the road. The steering is mechanical and direct. The suspension is firm, but forgiving. And the body structure itself feels incredibly rigid, even decades later. This wasn't a car designed to win on a spec sheet. It was designed to feel right after 10, 20, or even 30 years of use. Mechanically, the naturally aspirated engines in the 190E lineup developed a reputation for long service life. When properly maintained, these powertrains can handle extremely high mileage without major internal failures. The transmissions, both manual and automatic, were built with a simplicity that modern cars often lack. What makes this model truly underrated is that it doesn't try to impress you immediately. It grows on you. The more time you spend with it, the more you realize how carefully everything was designed. From the way the doors close, to the way the dashboard materials age, to the way the car tracks down the highway at speed, it feels like a product of a time when Mercedes engineers were focused on longevity first and features second. For many enthusiasts, the 190E becomes a lifelong car, not because it's flashy, but because it simply never gives them a reason to let it go. 2. Mercedes-Benz C219 CLS-Class. The first-generation CLS is often remembered for one thing: its shape. When it launched, it created an entirely new segment, the 4-door coupe. The design was bold, sleek, and emotional, but over time, that styling overshadowed what the car actually was beneath the surface. Underneath the flowing bodywork, the C219 shared much of its engineering with more traditional Mercedes sedans. That meant solid structural design, strong drivetrains, and suspension systems built for long-distance comfort rather than short-term excitement. Owners who keep these cars long-term often talk about how well they age compared to expectations. The interior materials, especially on well-maintained examples, hold up surprisingly well. The seats retain their shape. The dashboards resist cracking. The driving experience remains refined even as the mileage climbs. Mechanics often note that the simpler engine configurations in this generation tend to be more durable than people assume. When serviced properly, these powertrains can deliver years of reliable use without becoming financial nightmares. What makes the CLS truly underrated is that it sits in a strange space in the market. It's not a classic luxury sedan. It's not a sports car. And it's not a full-size flagship. But for the people who actually own one, that middle ground becomes its greatest strength. It offers style without sacrificing comfort, performance without sacrificing stability, and luxury without feeling disconnected from the road. Over time, many owners come to see it as one of the most balanced Mercedes designs of its era. 3. Mercedes-Benz R170 SLK. The R170 SLK is often dismissed as a small roadster, in a brand known for grand luxury sedans and massive SUVs. But among people who truly understand Mercedes engineering, this car holds a very different reputation. This was one of the first affordable ways to experience a Mercedes with rear-wheel drive, a proper chassis, and a power retractable hardtop. It wasn't designed to be the fastest or the most luxurious. It was designed to be fun, durable, and usable. Long-term owners often describe the SLK as one of the most mechanically honest Mercedes models ever built. The layout is simple. The engines are straightforward. The electronics are limited compared to modern cars, and that simplicity translates directly into reliability. Many of these cars continue to serve as daily drivers, well past the mileage where most people would expect a luxury roadster to be retired. The suspension components are robust. The drivetrain is tolerant of regular use, and the structure itself remains solid even after years of exposure to weather and road conditions. What makes the SLK underrated is that it doesn't fit the traditional image of what a Mercedes should be. But for those who own one, it represents something increasingly rare. A luxury brand car that you can actually enjoy without constantly worrying about repair bills. It becomes less of a showpiece and more of a companion, a car you take out not to impress others, but because it simply feels good to drive. 4. Mercedes-Benz R129 SL. The R129 SL is often seen as a classic, but it's still widely underestimated in terms of what it represents in Mercedes history. This car was developed during a period when Mercedes' engineering philosophy focused heavily on building cars that could survive decades of use. Safety systems were mechanical and structural rather than digital. Engines were designed for long-term durability rather than peak performance numbers. Owners frequently talk about how solid this car feels even today. The body structure is heavy, stiff, and confidence-inspiring. The suspension delivers comfort without losing stability. And the powertrains, especially the naturally aspirated 6-cylinder and 8-cylinder engines, have proven capable of extremely long service lives. What truly separates the R129 from many modern luxury cars is its mechanical transparency. When something goes wrong, it can usually be diagnosed and repaired without specialized software or proprietary systems. This makes it attractive not just to collectors, but to people who actually want to drive their cars regularly. The R129 is underrated because it exists in a strange space between classic and modern. It doesn't have the simplicity of older Mercedes models, but it also doesn't have the complexity of newer ones. That balance makes it one of the most livable long-term Mercedes roadsters ever built. 5. Mercedes-Benz R-Class. The R-Class is one of the most misunderstood vehicles Mercedes has ever produced. At a glance, many people don't even know what to call it. It's not quite an SUV, it's not quite a minivan, and it's not quite a wagon. But for families and long-term owners, this unusual design becomes its greatest advantage. The R-Class offers space, comfort, and ride quality that rivals full-size luxury SUVs, but with a lower center of gravity and a smoother driving experience. The cabin is designed for long journeys, not short trips. Seats are supportive. Visibility is excellent. And the suspension is tuned for comfort rather than stiffness. From a mechanical perspective, the R-Class shares many components with other proven Mercedes platforms, which gives it a surprisingly strong reliability profile when properly maintained. Owners who commit to regular servicing often report years of dependable use, even at high mileage. What makes the R-Class underrated is perception. It never fit into a popular category, so it never developed a strong public image. But for the people who actually live with one, it becomes one of the most practical and comfortable Mercedes vehicles they've ever owned. Final thoughts. The most underrated Mercedes models aren't the ones that win awards or dominate marketing campaigns. They're the ones that quietly prove themselves over time. These are the cars that stay in families for generations. The cars that mechanics respect because they're built logically. The cars that owners defend because they've never left them stranded. In a world where vehicles are increasingly disposable, these Mercedes models represent something different. They represent a philosophy of building cars to last, not just to sell. If you enjoyed this deep dive into Mercedes' most underrated models, support the channel by liking the video, subscribing for more real automotive stories, and leaving a comment below. And here's a question for you. Which Mercedes model do you think the world is still sleeping on, and why? Let's talk about it in the comments.